What if you discovered a notebook that didn't wait for your words, but wrote its own? Not in the morning, not in the afternoon, only at midnight. And what if the words it wrote were about you? It was a restless night, the kind that feels heavier than the day. The clock on the wall ticked past 11, each second dragging slower than the last. In the corner of the room, a desk sat under a weak lamp, covered with books, papers, and a half-finished cup of cold tea. That's when the notebook appeared. It wasn't bought, it wasn't gifted. It was simply there, resting on top of the pile as though it had always belonged. A thick, leather-bound book, edges worn, its cover too dark to reflect the light. The air around it felt strange, heavier, as if the room itself was holding its breath. The student, alone, tired, eyes red from sleepless nights, reached out. Their fingers brushed against the cover, and a shiver moved through their body. Not fear, not yet, just the kind of chill that comes when something doesn't fit. Still, curiosity was stronger. They opened it. The pages inside were blank. No lines, no marks, no notes from the past. Just white, untouched paper. But the texture was odd, rougher than any notebook should be, almost like skin. The student frowned, telling themselves it was nothing, just imagination twisting ordinary details. They left the notebook on the desk and tried to return to work. But the clock's hands climbed toward midnight, and something in the silence began to change. The room grew quieter, too quiet, as though even the night outside had gone still. The light flickered once, twice, before steadying again, and then the sound came, a scratch. Soft, steady, like the movement of a pen across paper. The student froze, their pen still in hand, but it wasn't them writing. Their gaze fell to the notebook. The cover trembled just slightly, and the sound grew louder. They leaned closer. The pages were moving on their own. Lines of ink stretched across the paper, letter by letter, forming words no hand was guiding. The student's heart slammed against their ribs. Their breath caught, but their eyes didn't move away. They watched as a message appeared: "You cannot sleep tonight." The pen dropped from their hand. For a long moment they just stared, wide-eyed, certain they were imagining it. But the words were there, black ink seared into the page, fresh and wet. Their trembling fingers brushed over the letters, smearing nothing. It was dry, as if it had been there for years. They closed the notebook quickly, shoving it under another pile of papers. It had to be a trick. Maybe they had written it themselves and forgotten. Maybe they were too tired, hallucinating from sleepless nights. The brain does strange things in the dark. That's what they told themselves, but even as they lay in bed, the sound echoed in their ears. The scratching, the words, and the warning: sleep would not come. Every time they closed their eyes, they saw the notebook, waiting, whispering, and somewhere in the silence of the room, just as the clock struck midnight, the scratching began again. Asterisk, the next day was heavy, like carrying a weight that no one else could see. The student tried to push away what had happened, burying themselves in small routines, eating breakfast without tasting it, walking through the quiet streets, pretending everything was normal. But every reflection in the shop windows, every shadow on the walls reminded them of the notebook. It felt as though something invisible was following, watching. By nightfall, exhaustion pressed down hard. Their body craved sleep, but the memory of that first message clung like a shadow. As the clock's hands inched toward midnight, unease filled the room again. The air thickened, colder, pressing against the skin, and then, like before, the scratching began. This time, they didn't wait. Their hands moved toward the notebook on instinct, though every part of their body screamed not to touch it. The cover was warm, unnaturally so, like it had been waiting. They opened it. New words spilled across the page. The ink danced faster. Not careful like handwriting, but urgent, messy, alive. The message burned into the page: "You will break the glass tomorrow." The student's stomach tightened. They whispered the words aloud, as if saying them would drain their power. It was nonsense, just random, just another cruel trick of their tired mind. But deep down they knew it wasn't random. The next morning, the prediction came true. While washing a glass at breakfast, it slipped, shattering into sharp pieces across the floor. Their heart froze as they looked down at their trembling hands. It wasn't the glass that frightened them. It was the notebook's voice echoing in the act. That night, fear turned into obsession. They sat by the desk as the clock neared midnight, waiting for the scratching. Part of them hoped it wouldn't come, that the silence would return and prove it was only madness. But as the first chime struck, the sound rose again, steady, relentless. The notebook opened itself this time, the pages fluttering until they stilled. The ink carved deeper now, the letters bold, pressed hard into the paper. The stranger will knock. Do not answer. They stared at the sentence, heart pounding. Stranger? Knock? Their gaze darted toward the door, toward the window. Nothing, just silence. They sat in the chair for hours, staring at the entry until exhaustion finally dragged them into a restless sleep, but at dawn, the knock came, 3 sharp raps on the door. The sound was small, ordinary, but it struck their bones like thunder. The student didn't move, didn't breathe, every muscle locked. Minutes stretched into an eternity before the knock came again, slower this time, deliberate. Then silence, when they finally found the courage to look through the peephole. The hallway was empty, their hands shook as they turned back toward the desk. The notebook was waiting. The same page, the same words, do not answer. By now, the notebook was no longer just an object. It was something else, something alive. It had seen tomorrow before they had, and it had warned them. But the question grew sharper with every tick of the clock. Was it warning them or controlling them? Asterisk, the third night felt different. The air itself seemed a weight, holding secrets too heavy for silence to carry. The student had tried to resist. They had hidden the notebook under the floorboards, stacked with old newspapers and dust. But just as the clock approached midnight, the sound began again, that scratching. Slow, deliberate, the same as before. The student's chest tightened. They whispered, "No," over and over, as if saying it could keep the words away. But when they lifted the wooden board, the notebook was already open. A fresh page bled with words. This time, the writing wasn't a prediction. It was a memory. You left the lights on at the library last winter. You were the last to leave. You thought no one saw. The student froze. Their throat dried, their heart hammering against their ribs. This wasn't the future. This was something no one else should know. A forgotten mistake, buried in the fog of months gone. But the notebook had remembered. They slammed it shut, but their hands shook too violently to hold it still. They whispered to themselves that it was impossible, just coincidence or madness pressing too hard against the edges of their mind. And yet, when they opened it again, the words had changed. You lied. You still lie. You cannot hide from me. The student staggered back from the desk, their chair toppling to the floor. Panic swelled inside them, thick and choking. This was no longer a trick of the mind, no longer simple predictions. The notebook was digging deeper into their past, into their secrets. For the first time, anger cut through the fear. They grabbed the book and hurled it across the room, the sound echoing off the walls. Their breathing was ragged, their body trembling. But even from the corner of the room, the notebook glowed faintly in the lamplight, as though mocking their attempt to be free. And then the words appeared without the cover even opening. Tomorrow you will see blood on your hands. The student froze, staring at the cover. Their stomach turned cold, their body locked in dread. The words pressed into their mind like a curse, each syllable twisting deeper. Blood on their hands. The next day passed in a blur of fear. Every movement felt like walking on a knife's edge. They avoided knives, avoided glasses, even avoided shaking hands with strangers. But paranoia doesn't wait. It grows, creeping into every corner of the mind. By dusk, their fingernails had dug red crescents into their palms. They didn't even notice until they saw the stains. Small, faint, but still blood. The notebook's promise fulfilled, they staggered. Back from their desk, eyes wide, breath sharp. It wasn't prediction anymore. It wasn't warning. It was command. The notebook didn't just tell the future. It shaped it. The student's fear turned to something darker. They realized they were no longer asking if the notebook was real. The real question was, how much of themselves it already owned. When midnight came again, they didn't hide. They sat at the desk waiting, their eyes locked on the pages as the scratching began. The ink spilled across the paper faster now, as if eager. You are not the writer. You are the story. The student's mouth went dry. Their hands trembled against the desk. And for the first time they whispered back into the darkness, "What do you want from me?" The scratching stopped. The page was still. For a moment, the silence felt unbearable, crushing. And then one single line appeared slowly, painfully, as though etched directly into their bones, to finish what you started. The fourth night did not creep in slowly. It came like a storm. The student didn't even try to sleep this time. The bed was untouched, sheets still neatly pulled as they sat at the desk in the dim glow of the lamp. The notebook rested in the center, shut tight, though its presence was louder than silence. It was as if the entire room pulsed around it, every tick of the clock pulling them closer to something they could not escape. At 11:59, they whispered to themselves, a desperate plea, "This is the last time. Tonight I'll end it." But even as the words left their lips, they knew the notebook had already heard them. Midnight. The scratching exploded across the page before they even touched it. The cover snapped open like it had a will of its own, and the ink poured across the paper, as if the pages bled words. This time there was no waiting, no delay, no cryptic phrases. It wrote with certainty, "You cannot run, you cannot hide. You are already inside the story." The student's breath faltered. Their eyes stung, but they couldn't look away. The letters continued, filling the page, spilling into the next, unstoppable. "You thought you found me. You thought you opened me, but I was the one who found you." Every word, every fear, every sleepless night, all of it was written before you were born. And tonight you will see. Their hands shook as they tried to slam the notebook shut, but it resisted. The pages whipped violently, faster and faster, until the entire room seemed to swirl with sound, paper tearing the air, ink spilling into shapes that shouldn't exist. The lamp flickered, shadows stretching unnaturally along the walls, then silence. One page lay open, flat and still. The handwriting slowed, almost careful now. The final words etched themselves into the paper. "Look behind you." Their body froze. Every instinct screamed not to move, not to obey, but the pull was stronger than fear. Slowly, painfully, they turned their head. The room was empty. No one there. Just the hum of the lamp and the stillness of night. Relief almost flooded and almost, until they looked back at the notebook. The page had changed. The words were gone. New ones appeared, fresh, alive, forming letter by letter. As their eyes followed in horror, "You didn't see me because I am not behind you. I am in front of you, right here, reading this with you." The student stumbled back, the chair crashing against the floor. Their chest tightened, their vision blurred, but the words kept coming, faster now, endless. They poured down the page, like a river of ink. "Every second you have listened, every detail you have followed, I have written into you. You are the notebook now, your story is no longer your own." And then the ink stopped. The pages turned blank again, as if nothing had ever been there. The notebook lay still, quiet, harmless. The lamp steadied, the shadows calmed. For a moment, the student thought it was over, but when they reached out with trembling hands to close it once and for all, they saw something that made their blood run cold. On the final page, in tiny letters at the bottom corner, it was no longer speaking. To them, it was speaking to someone else, and you, reader, you will turn the page at midnight.